The Byzantine Empire was not only a legacy of Rome, it was a major power in its own right and survived nearly 1,000 more years after the fall of Rome. It became the longest-lasting medieval power, and its influence still continues today. Hello, and welcome to our channel. Today, we are going to tell you how Rome became the Byzantium Empire. So, let us begin. The Roman Empire stretched from northern England to Syria by the early 4th century AD. The Emperor Diocletian instituted the Tetrarchy in AD 293 due to the fact that it had grown problematic and difficult to administer. As a result, the empire was divided into 4 areas, each of which was ruled by an emperor, Augustus, and his or her successor, Caesar. One of these Caesars was Constantius, who lived from 250 to 306, who later became Augustus in the west. After he passed away in 306, Constantine, his son, was proclaimed Augustus by the troops. After defeating Maxentius, a competitor for the Western crown, in the Battle of Milvian Bridge in AD 312, Constantine gained control of the western part of the Roman Empire. Legends from Constantine's lifetime claim that, before the conflict, Constantine experienced a spiritual awakening that led to his conversion to Christianity. After defeating Licinius, the emperor in the east, at the Battle of Chrysopolis in what is now Turkey in the year 324 AD, Constantine was crowned emperor of the entire Roman Empire. Following the restoration of the empire, Constantine instituted a number of significant reforms that created the groundwork for the Byzantine Empire. One of these decisions was to make Christianity the favored religion of the state. On May 11, 330, he made the decision to move the Roman Empire's capital from Rome to Byzantium. The emperor's formal designation of New Rome was quickly replaced by the more common appellation Constantinople, or City of Constantine. The new city, which straddled the border between Europe and Asia, had a fantastic natural harbor on the Golden Horn Strait and could regulate the flow of ships via the Bosphorus from the Aegean to the Black Sea, uniting profitable trade between the west and east. The entrance to the Golden Horn was guarded by a large chain, and the city was able to withstand coordinated assaults from both sea and land thanks to the gigantic Theodosian walls that were built between 410 and 413. Although Constantine oversaw a united Roman Empire, this unity was only a mirage upon his passing in 337. Emperor Valentinian I again divided the empire into western and eastern halves in 364, placing his brother Valens in charge of the west and himself in charge of the east. Over the following many centuries, the two regions' fortunes dramatically differed. The failing Roman Empire in the west was gradually torn apart by relentless attacks from Germanic invaders like the Visigoths, with only Italy remaining under Roman rule. The last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus, was overthrown in 476 by the barbarian Odoacer, and after many centuries, the once powerful Empire of Rome had crumbled. Emperor Justinian I took over in 527. His uncle, Justin I, who usurped the throne in 518 after serving as a royal guard, was his adoptive father. Justinian's reign didn't begin well, despite the fact that many historians believe the Byzantine Empire's golden period began during his reign. Justinian took steps early in his rule to strengthen Christianity's position as the Byzantine Empire's state religion. Traditional Greco-Roman faiths were largely outlawed by the time he came to the throne, In order to further this, Justinian closed the philosophical school in Athens in 529. This institution taught pupils about the writings of classical Greek philosophers like Plato, who had adhered to the old Greco-Roman religions. 5 years into his tenure in 532, the Nika riots erupted in Constantinople. Nika means victory or conquer in Greek. Constantinople, like with other imperial towns, was divided into two groups, the Blues and the Greens, who frequently engaged in rivalry during chariot races and other events, according to the ancient author Procopius, who lived in the 6th century AD. The popularity of chariot racing at the time was enormous, and they were linked to imperial authority. Authorities in Byzantium detained some members of both factions before the uprising and gave them death sentences. Supporters of the Blues and Greens were enraged by this, as well as the high taxes Justinian had levied. After their demands for the release of the detained members were denied, the factions banded together and attempted to topple the emperor. Members of the two factions conspired together and declared a truce with each other, captured the inmates, and then immediately entered the prison and liberated all those who were imprisoned there. After several days of rioting, Justinian was forced to dispatch troops to quell the troublemakers. Despite the extensive damage the riots produced, Justinian used the opportunity to construct something magnificent. He commanded the construction of a new, far larger cathedral at the location of a demolished church known as the Hagia Sophia, meaning Holy Wisdom. Between 541 and 542, a plague ravaged Justinian's realm and even struck the emperor, who survived. The population of Constantinople, according to some academics, may have decreased by as much as 1/3, although many of his compatriots did not. Things got worse at the same time due to a food shortage brought on by the chilly weather. According to research, Earth experienced a significant cooling in AD 536 as a result of debris from Halley's Comet being thrown into the atmosphere. Additionally, it has been proposed that El Salvador's recent volcanic explosion may have contributed to the milder weather. In 565, Justinian I died. As a series of tragedies befell the empire, the centuries after Justinian are frequently referred to as the Byzantine Dark Age. Much of the area Justinian had conquered in the west was lost. Gaul was under Frankish control by the start of the 7th century, and the coastal districts of Spain, the last holdover from Justinian's reconquest, were soon to fall to the Visigoths. Between 630 and 660, Arab kingdoms, most notably the Rashidun and Umayyad caliphates, captured a large portion of the empire's eastern territories, including Egypt. The Byzantine position was considerably undermined by this. The Golden Age, under Justinian's leadership, was never experienced again by Byzantium. However, by the 9th century, the military situation had stabilized, and by the 11th, Byzantium had recovered back a sizable portion of the lost territory. Byzantium was the dominant power of the Balkans and the Middle East, with apparently secure frontiers along the Danube, in the Armenian highlands, and beyond the Euphrates by the time of Emperor Basil II's death in December 1025, after nearly 50 years in power. However, the comeback of sorts was tenuous, to say the least. Byzantium was still striving for survival 50 years later. All of its borders were crossed. The Normans had conquered the Italian regions of the Byzantine Empire at this point, while nomads were moving into Turkey and the Danube provinces. However, the empire gradually re-established some measure of stability and continued. On July 16, 1054, Michael I Cerularius, the patriarch of Constantinople, was excommunicated by a papal legate by the name of Humbert of Silva Candida. Pope Leo IX had just passed away at the time, and a successor had not been chosen. The patriarch refused to cede his position of authority, and in response, excommunicated Humbert. Because of this, there was a split between the churches in Rome and Constantinople. All churches in Constantinople were required to adhere to rules introduced by Michael I Cerularius that were based on Greek tradition. Pope Leo IX took offense to this and dispatched delegates to Constantinople under the leadership of Humbert, along with a letter of protest. After Pope Leo IX passed away, Humbert made the decision to excommunicate Cerularius, as he wrote to Kennedy. Cerularius declined to meet with these legates. Over the years, a lot of cultural distinctions had emerged between Greek and Western churches. For example, the Greek churches tended to use leavened bread, whereas the churches in Rome used unleavened bread. Additionally, there were disagreements regarding the proper wording for the Nicene Creed, a declaration of faith. Other variances were the celibacy requirements for priests, with Greek churches permitting married priests. The Crusades, a series of holy wars fought by European Christians against Muslims in the Near East from 1095 to 1291, began at the end of the 11th century. Emperor Alexius I turned to the west for assistance as the Seljuk Turks of Central Asia closed in on Constantinople. Pope Urban II then declared holy war at Clermont, France, which marked the start of the First Crusade. Alexius attempted to compel their leaders to sign an oath of fealty to him in order to ensure that territory taken back from the Turks would be returned to his empire, while armies from France, Germany, and Italy poured into Byzantium. After the Turks were driven out of Nicaea in Asia Minor by Western and Byzantine forces, Alexius and his army withdrew, prompting allegations of betrayal from the Crusaders. The rivalry between Byzantium and the West grew throughout the succeeding Crusades, reaching its peak in 1204 with the invasion and pillage of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade. Due to the open antagonism of the populace and the city's lack of resources, the Latin government that had been created in Constantinople was on fragile ground. In Nicaea, a Byzantine government in exile that would reclaim the capital and usurp Latin control in 1261, many refugees from Constantinople fled. The once powerful Byzantine state's economy suffered under the reign of the Palaeologan emperors, beginning with Michael VIII in 1261, and it never recovered. Emperor John V was imprisoned in Venice for being an insolvent debtor in 1369 after trying in vain to obtain financial assistance from the West to deal with the escalating Turkish menace. 4 years later, he was made to submit to the powerful Ottoman Empire as a vassal, just like the Serbian princes and the Bulgarian ruler. Byzantium supported the Sultan militarily and paid tribute to him as a subordinate state. The Ottoman tyranny was occasionally eased by John's successors, but the ultimate reprieve ended in 1421 with the accession of Murad II to the Sultanate. Murad besieged Constantinople and revoked all privileges granted to the Byzantines. His successor, Mehmed II, finished the process by launching the ultimate assault on the city. Mehmed triumphantly visited the Hagia Sophia on May 29, 1453, after an Ottoman army had seized Constantinople. The Hagia Sophia would soon be turned into the most important mosque in the city. The Byzantine Empire experienced a brilliant period that came to an end with the fall of Constantinople. On that day, Emperor Constantine the 11th was killed in battle, the Byzantine Empire fell, and the Ottoman Empire began its lengthy rule. Literature, art, architecture, law, and religion all flourished under the Byzantine Empire in the years before the eventual Ottoman conquest in 1453, despite the empire's own decline. As Renaissance scholars sought their assistance in interpreting Greek pagan and Christian works, Byzantine scholars would have a significant impact on Western intellectual tradition. Long after it had come to an end, Byzantine civilization and culture continued to have an impact on nations that followed its Eastern Orthodox Church, including, among others, Russia, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece. So that is all the time we had today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and to hit the bell icon on your way out. See you all next time.